right? And so, no, I would love for you, Miriam, if there's a founder in that spaghetti stage, what do you advise them to do right?
Oh, Seema, I think I mean, when you're at that spaghetti stage, it literally feels like you're pushing this boulder up a hill and you're the only one doing it and it has no momentum and you're just at it, and you're like, what am I even doing? This is so hard. You've given up your day job. You're probably like, taking a big financial cut. Your family's probably judging you. I mean, it's a lot, right? I mean, you're at that stage. And I have always approached this. It sounds really cliche and a little bit like mushy, but I've always approached it with these three P's, which is passion, perseverance, and purpose. So if you have that passion in your belly and you have that purpose, that direction, and if you persevere and show up every single day, that's literally it.
Welcome to the From Spaghetti to Growth podcast. I'm your host, Seema Alexander, a business growth strategist and advisor and creator of the unique method. In each episode, I have unfiltered conversations with successful founders, CEOs, and experts where we delve into their business journeys of how they went from chaos to growth and everything in between. If you're an entrepreneur seeking inspiration, tips, and strategies to take your business to the next level and turn your spaghetti into growth, this is the podcast for you. Now let's start growing. On today's episode, we have Mariam Nusrat, a US-based Pakistani entrepreneur, the founder of Grid, a tech startup unleashing the power of video games for social change. Her platform, Breshna.io, empowers users to create, share, and monetize their own educational video games with no code and at lightning speed. Guys, think Canva for video games. Breshna has already had over 43,000 users and has been backed by investors including Paris Hilton, Blockchain Founders Fund, Alpha Sigma Capital, and more. For her work, Nusrat has been recognized to be one of the Forbes Next 1,000 list and is on a mission to empower the next 100 million people to tell their stories through video games. I'm so excited to share Mariam's story with you today on how she went from spaghetti to growth. Let's get going. Welcome to this episode of the From Spaghetti to Growth podcast. Every time I tell you, I am so excited for our next guest, but this time, I mean, it just keeps getting better and better. And Mariam Nusrat and she's the founder, if you don't know, of a company called Breshna.io, which is truly the Canva for the gaming industry. And we're going to get really deep into what that means in a few minutes. But Mariam and I met through DC Startup Week. I'm one of the co-producers there. And, there's always some standout founders when we produce events like that, and people who really tell stories well and share unfiltered realities of what it means to grow a business. And so I knew, Mariam, I had to have you as one of my first guests on this podcast from Spaghetti to Growth to really dig into all of it, all of it. Okay, so you ready for me?
I love, love, love it. Thank you so much for having me, Seema. And let's go. I love that.
Okay, so first question I ask everybody out of the bat: what was the driving force behind your decision to start a business?
Oh, so I think it was less start a business, more start the solution, right? So I think the biggest driving force for me came from this idea that, I was actually working at the World Bank as an economist across 22 different countries, sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Middle East. And one of the things that I realized was that purposeful communication, so communication for training, social impact, it's often very boring. So 8 years ago, I mean, I grew up playing SimCity and I was learning about urban planning without even knowing I was learning about urban planning. So I was like, you know what? There's a way for us to leverage video games for training. So 8 years ago, I started my own not-for-profit gaming studio where we were creating mobile games for positive behavior change. So we made games on like stuff like menstrual health and financial literacy and climate action and stuff like that. And very quickly, we realized that there's a huge demand for these games, but that, it's expensive to create. It takes a very long time. So there's a cost, time, and skills barrier to game development. And we
Yeah.
wanted to break those barriers. And that was the birth of Breshna.
Wow. Okay. So I want everybody to hear this. Clearly, this is entrepreneurship 101. I didn't start a business to start a business. I started a business to solve a problem, right? and clearly, what is it? It is gamifying communication is what I heard in that, right? And your
Yes.
target and what so when you were at the World Bank, let's actually move back a little bit, when I was in corporate back in the day, I spent 3 years in internal communications is one of the most important, I think. It's such a great skill set to have because you start to learn about how people hear messaging and how to target and all of that. So when you were working in that space at the World Bank, boring, like, but like World Bank to gaming, like, give me a little, like, you need to unpack that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Seema, again, so like, I mean, I am economist by academic training, and actually the World Bank, I was in third grade, and my dad put out like logos in front of me, and it was like the London School of Economics, and then it was the World Bank, and he was like, you're gonna do your economics from LSE, and then you're gonna go work at the World Bank. So the World Bank for me was like the gold standard of my professional career. So, I mean, while I was working there, I think I never, I mean, and this is something very common in the gaming industry is side note, the average gamer is actually a 36-year-old woman, often playing something like Candy Crush on the Metro. But when you ask a woman, I mean, who all would probably spend 2 hours on her mobile phone playing games, if you're a gamer, they always say, no, I'm not a gamer, but I do love games, right? So I was a gamer like that, where I was like, I mean, I didn't consider myself a gamer. I'm not a computer, so I'm not a software engineer. I'm not a coder. So for me, like, I mean, a career in games was nowhere on the horizon. But again, purposeful communication. I was at the bank and international development. When you're thinking about behavior change with the bottom billion, unfortunately, entertainment is never on the agenda, right? It's always like, well, just teach them and they'll go change their behavior. And it's one of those reasons why you see things like, mosquito nets being used as wedding veils and football nets, and you see condoms being used as animal balloons, because that last mile of behavior change doesn't happen, right? That last mile of awareness and education does not happen, because it's always like, hey, if we provide people with a solution, they're somehow going to change their behavior. And I really started, like, the more I saw it, I really started thinking about this idea of like, how are we communicating? How are we, like, inspiring behavior change? And if you look at the developed country, or like, I mean, the US or something, I mean, there's this idea of, Fitbit. Fitbit gamified health, right? It was just like, hey, I'm tracking my steps. I have a leaderboard. I'm trying to, beat my friends and everything. Pokemon Go gamified movement. I mean, people were
Sure.
getting up, they were out and about and everything. So for me, it was just like, okay, let's just see what's in there. And I went down this rabbit hole of just trying to look at video games for positive behavior change. And this was 8 years ago, when serious gaming wasn't really like a real industry. It was just something that was very muted. It wasn't really present. So I think for me, it was really inspiring to kind of start building games. One of the first games we built was on menstrual health. So you were catching pads and tampons with a pair of undies, because I grew up in Pakistan, and I grew up with the menstrual stigma. And to me, it was just something so beautiful to be able to unleash the power of games to bust the menstrual stigma. And we just made this game, and you were busting menstrual myths, and then that just kind of started and started and started. And we built games on climate action and financial literacy and just so many other things. And that's kind of where went from. But yeah,
Yeah, okay, no, I know. There's so much to unpack here, so I wanna slow it down a little bit because in the beginning, you went from purposeful communication to figuring out and thinking outside the box, right? You consider yourself not a gamer, but you also enjoy games, and I think, it's just really a funny anecdote. I have a neighbor who we went to a Super Bowl party, and she's a ER doctor, and literally halfway through the night, she's always on Candy Crush on the couch. It's like sort of her thing, right? And you're just like, wow, it's hilarious, right? Like, but what I want to pause there for a second is, as an entrepreneur, you have to think about your target audience, right? And sometimes when you have this conversation for you is about, hey, gamers have a specific connotation, right? That's like those guys are on the computer all day long playing. My stepbrother, he's a gamer. Like, he's just always on, right? but my kids enjoy games, right? Like there's just a different way. And so, it's just an important little nuance that I want to first unpack in what you said. Now you keep going. And so you go from this concept to how do you even create a game? I mean, I love where you were headed with the menstrual cycle and debunking myths and like starting to use it for like, it's almost like you're sharing storytelling and allowing people to say to use games for like what's the word when when it's like an X, like when you're like, you shouldn't be talking about this, but you should be talking about this. It's important for to communicate.
Yeah, like, I mean, breaking that taboo or stigma, I don't
There you
know.
go. Taboo, taboo. That's what I was saying. Yeah. So how for someone who didn't have that background, where did you even start? Because that's what I want to understand.
I love that because I think there's there's something about, so like, once I was like, I want to do this, like it just hugged me, right? Like I was thinking about it, I was sleeping on it, I was just like, okay, how? I mean, okay, I want to do this. I know I want to build a game on menstrual health, but what am I going to do? I don't know. I'm not a coder. What how am I going to go about this? One of the coolest things about being a student, so I was working at the World Bank, but I was also going to my second master's degree at George Washington. And I think what's really cool about being a student is a lot of times, universities provide ecosystems or incubators. It's one of those, like, where do you end up in an ecosystem that's going to kind of nurture you? And I literally applied to a student competition, which was the Clinton Global Initiative University, right? So it's the Clinton Foundation, and they just run this thing with universities all over. And that application became the catalyst, right? It was like, okay, I have this idea, I'm gonna run with this. And guess what I'm gonna do is, I'm not a developer, but I'm from Pakistan, and I have a brother who is, in Pakistan, who has a lot of developer friends, and I'm just gonna ask him if we can get someone, and we're just gonna build this. And one of the things I didn't realize is building a menstrual health game with Pakistani men and your Pakistani brother, who you've never talked to about menstruation, how you're busting the myth on menstruation, was just a whole bunch of fun. So I started at home with
Oh my
busting that
God.
myth. But yeah, we put together a team of developers and designers, and we just put a game out there. It was like out of pocket. It was like, you know what? It was $2,500. And we just put it out there, and we were like, you know what, let's just go with it. And that just snowballed, and that was the
Okay.
beginning.
So let's talk about the snowball then, right? Because, a lot of times founders, and this is a different conversation. I've had a lot of service-based people on. Now I'm just changing a lot of the business models. So this is tech-based. The biggest question is, all right, you have a solution. You think it's like validated, you think it's needed. How do you get users? How do you even validate that this is something that's real and it has legs? So how did you do that phase, right? After creating it or testing it?
Yeah. So I think what's really interesting, and I wonder, Seema, because now it's making me question, right? So there's the Grid, which was the gaming studio, and then there's the Breshna. And we had different validation techniques for both, right? And everything. And I think, like, when by the time Breshna came, it's a tech startup, it's a venture-backed tech startup. It has a very, like, build in public, have your MVP ready, and then go with it. It's that platform idea. So I think it might be valuable to kind of touch on that. But let me just quickly, for this one menstrual health game
Yeah.
that we just created, this one little app, I think what was really interesting is, for that one, the validation actually came from within. It was that whole idea. I grew up with the menstrual stigma, and there is a men in menstruation. So how am I gonna kind of change this conversation, because games are not for men or women, right? And so it was just like, okay, how are we gonna drill this down? And I think a lot of it came from, hey, friends who also grew up in Pakistan, do you want to play this game and just tell me what you think about it? And then one of it, which was really exciting, was I literally reached out to my mom and I was like, look, I'm building this for the bottom billion. I'm building this for women who are underserved. And you're in Pakistan right now. We have house help. Can you go to their village? So my mom literally got in her car and, like, went to the village of one of the people who works at our house, and she showed up and she got all of these women together. And on her phone, I literally still, I think I can dig out those pictures. It was our
Uh,
first, like, without knowing it, it was a focus group. It was one of the first times where she took her phone, and then she just, like, I was on the phone. Like, she wasn't video recording. My mom isn't very tech savvy. So I was on
Sure.
the phone and she was just like showing this app to people, and I was just gathering whatever insights I could, just being like, okay, is this valuable? What are you looking at it? Would you play it? How is this? How many times would you play it? And just stuff like that. So I think it was like a very organic, very grassroots.
Yeah. But this is the beauty in spaghetti, right? Because you don't even realize what you were doing with validation. But let me just, I wanted to actually add something here. Your first app was focused on social impact. Was it a profitable focus? Was it a impact and profit focus? Or was it, I mean, because what you just shared, you were debunking myths. You want the people in the bottom 1 billion, the most underserved, to really be educated on a very important topic. So you created this game. Now you're getting your more validation. But was it a impact and profit focused, or was this a nonprofit focus initially?
Yeah, so I think that's Seema right there, right? Because we established a not-for-profit gaming studio, and I came
Okay.
at this from an international development world. So I was like, oh yeah, so like you build this for like, I mean, you just build this for good, and that's what I'm gonna go out and do. But very
Yeah.
interestingly, one of the things we realized was that we became a service-based studio, and we weren't working on donations and grants. We were actually generating revenue, making video games for USAID, George Mason University, like, I mean, other social impact, like organizations that do this work. So, like, it became a B2B model. And that is what became the birth of Breshna, because we realized that there's actually a revenue play and there's a scale play, right? So it's like we cannot build these games fast enough. How are we going to empower the people that are coming to us asking for these games? The demand is way bigger than how fast we can build these games. How are we going to empower them to create their own video games? And that was Breshna. And Breshna is a tech startup which has a profit model.
Okay, awesome. A little bit more unpacking here. Really cool to hear. I've worked with a lot of nonprofits as well, with repositioning them and otherwise. I'm a big believer of sustainability with nonprofits. So we're going to go from, now I understand, because the studio part, I didn't have the background yet on you. So this is really interesting. So it went from a nonprofit gaming studio that was not focused on grants and sponsorship, it was focused on sustainable revenue. Really important. I'm a big believer in that, right? Then you figured out that the demand was so big that you want to create a solution where people can create their own games. And that's where from service you went to tech. And this is just a really cool journey, guys. Like, a lot of people listening are in the service industry and they're like, how do I scale? And a lot of times you can scale your expertise in different courses in different ways, but this is the move from service to tech. So let's dig there. Let's go there.
I love it. And I think what's really interesting, Siva, so the story here is really exciting, right? So it's like, so this gaming studio is going, it's a side gig, everyone's doing it on the side. I have my day job at the time. We're like, whatever. Like, it's like when we get a contract, like when we used to get a contract, we'd go and make the game, and then we'd go back to, like, everyone would go back to their day jobs and everything. So we were like kind of making games on the side. And then COVID happened. And COVID happened, and the two things happened. The demand for purposeful communication, interactive and fun communication skyrocketed, right? Everyone all of a sudden was like, well, fun communication, I mean, everyone's online and we don't know how to keep people engaged. So, I mean, that happened. So, all of a sudden, serious gaming was picking up. And then another very interesting thing happened is I ended up on Twitter. And I ended up on Twitter, and half of Silicon Valley ended up on Twitter because deal flow, VCs were not getting deal flow in coffee shops, and they were out there, I mean, talking and seeking
Mhm.
deal flow, and cold DMs and cold outreach is something that just opened up. And I found myself in this VC Twitter corner. I mean, just happened to be there. Never was a world. I'm not a business. I'm like, I'm non-Ivy, I'm non-Silicon Valley. I don't know the difference. I didn't know the difference between a VC and an angel. Did not know. I mean, the best thing I knew about tech entrepreneurship was Shark Tank, right? So I was like, I don't know this world at all.
Which is a great foundation. Shout out
I
to
mean,
Shark Tank.
it's like
It
a
gives
neat.
you something. Yeah.
And what was really interesting, Seema, is actually in the beginning when I started pitching, I was pitching the service-based model, right? So I was like, "Oh, let me see. Like, okay, you just need. I mean, I'm building revenue. You
Yeah.
need me to show revenue. I'll show you revenue." And the very early feedback I got was, okay, how are you going to 10x this? And that's how are you going to 100x this? How are you going to 500x this? And that's what got me thinking. And that, I mean, it sounds so obvious now looking back, like the service to tech, but I think the
Yeah.
service to platform, I had to, and it's very intuitive because you literally put yourself out of business, right? Because it was like, okay, we're going to empower our customers to build their own video games, which is what we used to charge them for. But now we're going to build a platform which is going to make it cheaper, faster, easier for them to build these video games. And technically, we're going to put ourselves out of business as a gaming studio, but we're going to create this
Mhm.
platform. So I think that shift actually happened with me watching a few pitches very early on because these people had just opened office hours, some VC, some angels, and I got on and they were like, wait, that's all good, but your business model is not a platform. Like
Yeah.
where's your scale? And that scale became really important.
Yeah, a couple points here. Okay, service model moving to tech. My thought was the crypto, like the Twitter part is really interesting to me because I think with COVID came crypto Twitter, VC Twitter, right? That I was not on Twitter until COVID and like when everything with the NFT market and all that stuff started coming through. And we're going to talk Web3 in a few minutes with you. So that's interesting. But the point was service-based providers do not get funded. Like, that was one thing again, like, there are so many founders that are like, "Well, I," even when they have a lot of revenue and they've figured out a model that makes sense, it's just that it's too risky for ABC to fund service, right? So that's where this, like, revelation of, like, all right, 10x, 100x, 500x came to you, and you're like, "All right, we gotta make this into a tech play." All right? But I wanna also say, you make it in a tech play, but you're making more impact doing it. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. I mean, we're at 35,000 users that have made 37,000 video games. In as a gaming studio, we've made 11. You know, I
Wow.
mean,
It's huge, huge difference. Huge. Okay, we're gonna go into that. One thing I did want to step back is I you talked about when you had your gaming studio, it was a side hustle and you guys had full-time jobs and you would work on things when contracts would come in. How did you get the contract? Right? Like I know you worked at the World Bank, so wasn't that conflict of interest? Like, how did you get the contracts?
yeah, it's really interesting. So I think that, I mean, because serious gaming was so new, that once we created that first menstrual health game, I mean, I literally was reaching out to anyone that was working on a menstrual health project on LinkedIn and being like, hey, you're doing a workshop. I mean, it's going to be a boring brochure. Do you want to put a game as part of it? Right. And I think that right there was something that just became, it was such a big pain point that we started getting these, universities or organizations. So obviously did not work with the World Bank because there was a conflict of interest. I had to do a lot of conversations with our lawyers at the bank to make sure that that was a clear line that was drawn between my side hustle and my day job. But I think like it was really interesting to me because I did understand international development and I did understand how projects work. And I was like, all right, you know what? I mean, if there's a USAID project, if I reach out to the people that are working on this, they're going to need a game. And then we were just like, and then that's kind of where you just price it. And that's where it's a spaghetti, right? You're like,
Yes.
I don't know, it's going to be like $40,000. I don't know. This one's gonna be $5,000. And you just like you kind of, I mean, experiment and you go with it, and then it becomes there's method in chaos. It's like, but yeah, I mean, I think that was just cold outreach, which was the same thing I did when I got on Twitter VC later, right? Was just cold DMs, just blanket outreach, but a little bit strategic.
Yeah, there's no shortcuts, you gotta do the work, and intention is really key, right? So, okay, now let's go back to Twitter, to see Twitter for you, right? So you said you were being at that point, the idea let's just get a little deeper, the idea of Breshna. What I heard from you is that it's people can make their own video games in a non-code way.
Yes, so
That's
literally. And And I think that I still remember that phone call because again, I went back to my brother and I was like, okay, VC is a thing and that's where we're gonna go for money. But the thing is, we have to figure out scale. And then I and then it was like 101 a PC. And I was like, look, like Uber didn't go and buy cars, Airbnb didn't go and buy hotels. We don't have to
right.
go and buy games. Like we don't have to make the games. we have to provide the platform where people can do their own work and everything. And I think, interestingly, Seema, being non-tech worked for me because the fact of the matter was that I was building for people like myself, which was I am non-tech, so I do not want to interact with code. When I started looking for game maker platforms, everything that was in the market was low code, not no code. They would say they're no code, right? And then once you went into it, you're interacting with script. It's
Something.
it's a
Yeah.
steep learning curve, and you're like, I don't want to do this. And I am an avid user of Canva, and Canva took away
I
that
love that.
design dependency, and I was like, that's what I want. Like, I want a Canva like experience for a video. Like, and we
Yes.
started with one of our games. So again, the menstrual health game that we had made, like at the end of it, it was a catch the right answer. Like that was the gameplay. And I was like, guys, we had a pair of undies and people were catching pads. But what if it's a basket and you're catching even numbers? What if it's a pair of hands and you're catching balls? I was like, literally at the end of the day, the gameplay is the same if we look at these hyper casual games. So let's just pre-code the template, pre-code the gameplay, and we're going to white label everything else so people can put in their avatars, their backgrounds, their collectible items. That was kind of that, we started marinating on.
Okay, so non-tech founder, this is a big deal, right? Because when you have an idea and you don't have a technical background, you had a brother who was technical, or to your brother's friends, or okay, maybe not. So like because I think it's really important because some people get nervous and they're like, all right, do I make them my co-founder? But I don't know what they can do and I don't have the background to have any quality assurance. So how did you manage that process?
Yeah, and this is a really important one, Seema. It used to be one of the biggest questions we would get while fundraising, right? You're non-tech, you're building a tech platform. Why would I back you? And I think there's a myth that VCs do not fund non-tech solo founders. I don't think that's true. VCs do not fund non-tech solo founders that do not have an answer to the question, who is going to build your tech and how do you trust them? Right? So it's like, I mean, if you have
Mhm.
that answer, and the way I had that answer was I had spent 8 years working with 35 different developers while building these games on the side. So I had gone through the process of building relationships with a handful of 15 of them. And then once we were like, okay, we're going to go raise funding, this is going to be our core team. We've worked with them. My brother, who is also non tech, but manages the whole team. And I think he like learned quite a bit along the way in those 8 years of managing them. It was like,
Yeah.
we are going to go at this, and this is the team we're going to work with. So if you can identify the team, if you can show that you have control over them, if you can show the incentive that are aligned across the team, it doesn't always have to be equity. And actually sometimes, it really works out if they know that you've managed a single team for so many years. So I think that played in my advantage.
Did you have any issues with the tech team or you're like, "Oh my god, they're actually," then and that's the question, right? It's like, how are you managing a process that you are not in the know?
Yeah. So what's really cool is, first of all, it's that, like, I mean, when you think a team in Pakistan, somehow it's like, oh, you outsourced it, right? And this is very different because my brother is based out of Pakistan. So the quality assurance on the day-to-day management is like on the ground, right? And everything. But what we did, and then the other piece of it, so there's literally three pillars of quality control. One is like, are you doing your job? Are you showing up? That's like the here, I mean, physically present. No, there's not a power outage. No, because we're there. So we also know what the
Yeah.
power outage looks like. So that's like that physical presence. The other piece of it is you still know what you want them to build, right? So it's like, yes, I may not understand the A to B of it, but I do know what that end goal is. So you do understand that you want that to be built. And then the third piece that I did was, from day one, we used to have quality audits by advisors, by external advisors, right? So we would literally open it up, our code and everything. And it wasn't like, hey, here's someone else is going to come in and like, scrutinize my team. But it was like,
Right.
hey, let's learn together and let's build together and do these quality audits. So we've had quality audits happening regularly every single quarter by an external team, where not only do I get to understand the scale, the sustainability, the security of tech that we're building, but it's also an opportunity for the team to learn from the advisor and vice versa.
That's huge. I mean, I don't know, and then this is an early stage you started doing this? Was this like a process? How did you afford it? Like, because having a third party come in and audit, what a beautiful idea, right? Because then it's unbiased and you both are learning, but how did you afford it?
Absolutely. So our literally this is how it happened. Our first check was $50,000, and that was all we needed to start building our MVP. So again, the team was all salary based, right? Because I mean, highly efficient, high quality capital efficient team. Everyone's in Pakistan, so we have enough money to build our MVP. And then the advisor was an equity advisor, right? So it was like, okay, that's where you give up the equity is say, okay, you know what? I'm building something. You believe in this, can you provide that insight? And so it's been that round. And now, I mean, we have enough funding where we kind of like, because step three, like, I mean, the tech is also evolving. So it's not just one person who's doing a quality audit, it's actually three. So now we pay for it. But I mean, very early on, it was like, hey, advisor equity, give up that 1%, but you're not going to regret it because also you're not getting a CTO, you're not getting a co-founder equity, you're just doing it for the advisor and get it on. And I mean, that's how we did.
Okay, so now, okay, you have your MVP built. How do you get to go to market? Like, wait, that 50K check, where'd it come from?
Accelerator program, went on F6S, applied to every single incubator program that was out there, sent applications. It was this one amazing ocean accelerator, and it came with a VC check of 50,000, and that investor actually became our lead because they kept topping up because they loved what we were building. So at the end of it, it was just like a way larger check size because they just became our lead VC for the seed
Investor.
round. But yeah, yeah. But so now we've started building the MVP. And one of the things again, so this was again Twitter, right? So I was building in public before I knew what building in public was. So I was like, you know
Hmm.
what? I'm just gonna document this journey. Let's just see where it goes, right? I mean, I'm just gonna figure it out. So every single day, I was like, today we're working on this. This is the things to do list. I mean, it literally like tweets became my things to do list as I was going along with it. We started building. And one of the things we realized was that idea of throwing spaghetti at the wall. So what we did was we built our MVP so fast and we just put it out there. It was bare bones. And the night that we were gonna soft launch it, I literally had so much anxiety, and my brother, who's my co-founder, kept being like, "Hey, you know what? Let's just like maybe should we do it? Should we not do it? Should we delay it?" And we came across this quote from the LinkedIn founder, which was like, "If you are not embarrassed of what you launched, then you launch too late." And we were like, "Are we embarrassed of this? Yes, we are. Let's launch it." I think it was like, let's just put it out there. But I think that was just so beautiful. We did a game jam and we got 6,000 people on day one who made more than 3,000 video games on the platform. And these were games, it was like makeup and Valentine's and Trevor Noah and prom proposals. And then it was like
Mhm.
drug abuse and a dentist and dental hygiene and then education and geography and history and math. And it was just like, we were like, I mean, it could be anything. And I think it was just so beautiful opening that up and kind of learning from it.
Okay, three things, three questions in the middle of that. Co-founder, so that's your brother. How did you decide if you can share how much equity, like what does that look like? And it's family, right? So can you give us a little there? And then there are two other things you said that I want to go a little deeper in.
So it's very funny that you picked that up. So till date, I mean, in his mind, he's like, I mean, so we did decide on the equity. I am the majority holder. And then we have my brother and actually my husband. So it's a very family, it's definitely a family unit. That's the founding team. And I think literally until a month ago, it's always been solo founder and COO and CFO, right? So it's like CEO, COO, CFO. It's always been, hey, you're the founder, you're the leader, and you go with this. And actually, this shift to co founder, I think, has been organic. It wasn't really something that got reflected. It's not an equity shift. It's not a time. I mean, I think it really is an acknowledgement of I'm not going to do this alone. And it's really funny because he will still introduce himself as the COO. He doesn't really go with the co-founder label. But I think for me, the co-founder was less about how to cut the cake and how to slice that equity pie and more about I run the business, but he is the wheel. Like I may be on the steering, but he is the wheels and I just cannot do it without him. So that's where that co-founder switch happened.
And I think it's really important for people to understand that what you just shared is that you guys have complementary skill sets. You both don't have the same skill set. So if you're going and looking for your co-founder, you both do identically the same thing and you're just best buddies and that's cool. Guess what? That's going to be a problem in the business. No one's executing. Everybody might be a visionary or everybody might be an executor and not a visionary. I mean, you have to have that balance, right? And I think it's very important. Um, Documentation. So I love that, the LinkedIn, I don't know if it was a mentor or somebody or who said, "If you're not embarrassed by your first product, then you launch too late." That is so smart because that's analysis paralysis, that is, procrastination, that's trying to be perfect and perfection, all of that. But I loved that you documented the process. This is such an important I mean, stuff I also wanna learn. I've been doing things for a long time, 20 years, and I'm like, documentation is everything, and you started documenting on Twitter. Can you give us more of, like, how you did it, what you said, what you were open to sharing, what did that look like?
Yeah, so I think two things lend themselves to it, Seema. So one actually is interestingly that being a solo founder, so it was almost like accountability. I mean, when all of a sudden you're like you're your own boss, you're like, okay, wait, so like what am I doing? Like who's holding me accountable? So I think there's
Yeah.
like, I mean, if you're tweeting it out in public, if you're like, this week we're gonna work on like, this feature and this template, it was like a weird my own way of holding myself accountable is I have put it out in the public and now this is this is the roadmap we're going to follow, and it's not something internal where I can just crunch it and be like, well, never mind, like, we're going to be a week late. So it's like, I think it was really interesting to me. And honestly, it was literally, what did we achieve? What are we going to do? What did we achieve? What are we going to do? It was like literally week by week. It was just like, and I mean,
Wow.
getting one like, I mean, I had no one on Twitter. I mean, it was one of those things. And I will tag on something that I started fairly quickly. I mean, within, I think the first 3 months was when we sent our first investor update, was when we had no investors. So literally, I was like, okay, you know what? I would get on these calls and I would get a no for sure because they were like, you have not figured yourself out. So like, girl, like go get yourself together and come back to us. But my one question would always be, that's okay if you're saying no. Can I add you to my investor update? And they're like, okay, sure, yeah, go ahead and do that. And I was sending investor updates when my cap table had no investors. And that investor update became a monthly that tool of accountability, but also just this amazing marketing tool. Because I think one of the things I realized was investors invest in lines, not dots. So a lot of the no's were actually not nows that became yeses along the way. So I have 29 investors in my cap table. Every single one of them can be traced to a cold outreach. None of them was a warm intro. I didn't have a friends and family round. And the thing that really worked was that investor update and that building in public and that accountability.
Hold on one second. I mean, guys, that was so much gold right there. I don't like this is why I do this podcast because you can't get this out of people in normal conversation. It just sort of flows. There is so much gold in that. Like, I just want you to take that in. The way that you created investor relationships before you had investors and like that consistency of accountability of that report for yourself to like, you're like, I have to do this. And I think one of the things that founders lack or is a challenge is that consistency, right? It's like, do it anyway. You get one like, do it anyway. Doesn't matter, right? I do want to go into your gaming jam, as you called it, right? I know that's very common in your world, not very common probably for a lot of the people who are listening in. Getting 6,000 people for, I'm assuming, a launch. It's part of your launch strategy. How did you do that? So this is again goes back to you're creating a tech. Sure, you got validation with the 11 games that you had created in the studio. How the heck do you now create a consumer base of consistent, ongoing users for Breshna.io?
I think that right there, Seema, that 6,000, that was that built in public. So all of that came from, there was no digital marketing pay. There was none, $0 spent on ads. So that was all organic traffic that came from building a community. So we had an MVC before we had an MVP, right? So we had a
What does
community,
that mean? MVC. What is that?
minimum viable community, right? And Alexis
Mm.
Ohanian talks about this a lot
Oh.
now. I think Web3 has really opened up right now. Like now, investors will look at your Discord or your Twitter before they'll look at your tech and your platform. And I think
Yeah.
this was again in 2021 for me. It was really important of saying, okay, I have these people who I've been talking to who've been saying, okay, you know what, like we're looking forward to this. And the only ask I had was when we launch, just show up and try it out, right? It was like it wasn't, hey, we're going to do a trial period. It wasn't a, hey, sign up for a wait list. It was literally, I'm building this. I'll tweet it out. Just please show up, right? And everything. And I had
Sure.
no idea. Again, I didn't know if it was going to be 5 people or 6,000 people that were going to show up. And then what we also did was we reached out to all the people that we had built games for and all the other people that we weren't able to build games for. And we said, you know what? We were going to charge you like 20,000 or 30,000 for that. But today it's going to be free. You can do it in
Wow.
lightning speed. Breshna means lightning in the Pashto language. So it's like, it's going to take you less than
Mhm.
5 minutes and it's no code. So just try it out, just show up. And then it was like, hey, it's a competition. So then one of the things we didn't realize was the first, like, okay, the first 300 people showed up because we did that. But something that we completely did not anticipate was that there is something known, at least that I call a pride of content creation. So when you publish your first game, people are like, okay, I've made this. Now, what do I do with it? Right? It's like, because, and then they're like, okay, here's a URL link. People were WhatsApping it. People were making LinkedIn posts about it. People were like putting it up on Twitter and on their Facebook. And that was the flywheel of content creation where then their people were playing the game and saying, okay, that's cool. My mother just made that, or my aunt just made that game. I can make a better game. So someone, maybe my teacher made a math game, but I'm now going to go and make a Trevor Noah. And that,
Yeah.
like, inspiring flywheel of content creation was what got us from those first 100 to the 300 to the 500 to the 6,000.
Dude, you used your own consumers or potential consumers for free who got really excited. They say, I want to share this. What a viral moment. That's amazing. And did you have that already included in the way, or what I heard is you had a link. So the link is all they sent out, or was there like a system behind that?
Nope,
No.
just to the link to the game, and it
Wow.
just the only thing it said was this game was made on Breshna.io, and that's it. And then that's what got people to come back to Breshna.io and make their own video.
It kind of reminds me when you're on Facebook and then you see somebody like post something that they got from one of those, like, I don't know, assessments or tests, and they're like, you do it. Like, So that's pretty cool. So
Like,
what is the pricing model with Breshna.io? How does it work?
so it's really interesting. So far, so again, we went from MVP, we built our alpha, we launched our beta, and now we're at this point where we have 35,000 registered game makers that have made
Wow.
more than 36,000 video games. Thank you. And
Yeah,
interestingly enough, Seema, actually, there's an interesting because the 6,000 were the website users, right? They weren't registered accounts. We
sure.
actually ended 2022 with 4,000 accounts, and we had a 10,000 percentage growth, like a month to month growth in the month of January of this 2023. So if we were talking literally a month earlier, like if we were talking at the end of December, these numbers would be very different. And it's
Yeah.
because one of our go to market channel just, blew up. And I think that's so, like, once we built the product, we started tweaking with all of these go to market channels. They could say, what is the cost of acquisition? Is it scalable? What level of like growth is it bringing? And just one of them clicked, and that's that growth that we saw this January. But I think on the business model, it's completely free right now. So the whole idea is to build that user base, that base of the pyramid. And then when we launch our Web3, which is the Breshnaverse, which actually comes out of something that our users asked for. So they were able to create a game and share a game on Breshna. So it was like, here's my URL link. But they kept
Yeah.
asking for two things. How can I showcase my game and how can I monetize it? And that's where we were like, blockchain technology. We're going to build a metaverse, which is going to be a carnival where you will actually have a carnival stand where you will, if you've made 5 Breshna games, you can be like, hey, here are my 5 Breshna games. The first one's for free, but then the second one is 3 Breshna tokens and 5 Breshna tokens and 10. So the Breshnaverse is where we unlock 3 revenue channels: rev share, NFT sales, and immersive advertisements. So that's what we're building
Whoa.
towards, where we're building the base of the pyramid right now.
All right. The whole Web3 thing is going to be a whole other podcast. We're going to have to do that, but I'm going to go a little deep in that. Okay, so you created monetization, but my question was when you said one of the go-to-market strategies went, and it just blew up. What was it? You can't
No.
say that and not share.
Fair. That's a really fair point. So actually, it was an ambassador model. So very similar to that first MVP that we saw, where it was like people were sharing it. We said, you know what? The biggest thing that we realized with Breshna was that it was the education of Breshna. So once they've made their first video game, the retention is actually the easier part for us, right? Like the platform, it just hooks people, right? But it's about that discovery and that first game, that first learning curve, which we kept seeing was the bottleneck because people were like, it was a matter of disbelief. It was like, there is no way I will be able to make this game in 5 minutes. So we needed
Sure.
social, and that social proof came from ambassadors. So we said, we're going to have Breshna ambassadors and they're going to be rewarded at a per user base. So you will literally get $1 for every user that comes on Breshna and makes a game. So it's not just like someone that signs up. It's actually you come on Breshna and you create a video game because we know after that we can carry it, right? But those two roadblocks were the ones that we had. And that is what blew up because we basically found an entire community of mods, community managers that in the bear market from Web3 were looking for stuff to be engaged with. And guess what?
Yeah.
I mean, Discord communities are dead, but they were like, hey, I can be a Breshna ambassador. These are young youth from Nigeria, there's youth in Pakistan, there's youth in Philippines, and they're saying, hey, you know what? $1 matters a lot. I can make $100, I can make 200, they can make up to $20,000. And
Oh,
that
wow.
cost of acquisition, that $1 is way less than what paid digital marketing. Because on the paid side, the digital marketing side, it was like $4 cost of acquisition. So we one-fourth it, and we've created this community, this army of ambassadors.
All right. This is fun. Oh, sorry. All right, that was fun. Okay. That to me, again, gold. And the reason I cheer you on here is because everyone is looking for the lowest cost to acquisition, right? And when you find a strategy like that that engages your consumer, your target audience, they in the world of Web3 and this like pay to play or pay to, I don't like talk about that model, right? Because it's new in a lot of ways, right? And so maybe you can give us like a lot of people may not know everything. When you say you're building a metaverse, I'm assuming you're building a platform within the metaverse, which is Breshna. And like, what does that actually mean? Like, maybe you can dig a little deeper because just to give a little education on the Web3 side of this.
Yeah, and I think Seema, it's almost like there's this Web 2, Web 3, two different worlds. They do not talk. I actually think the borders are very porous. I think that movement from Web 2 to Web 3, there's a lot in Web 2 that we can take to Web 3, and there's a lot in Web 3 that we can bring back to Web 2. At the end of the day, it's just are you on chain or off chain, right? Like I mean, the user behavior. I mean, we don't go to a user and we're like, we're using AWS cloud storage, or this is what we're
Yep.
doing. I mean, why are we so obsessed with what chain we're building on? I mean, the Web 3 lingo is I think the biggest problems with mainstreaming the
100%.
next billion people into Web 3. And I do think that's a different podcast. But I think like very quickly, what we're doing right now, the ambassador model is off chain. So it is a refer to earn if you think about it, but it is completely off chain. It's just with the Web 3 community that very used to that reward for hustle behavior, right? And everything. And I think what's really interesting is unfortunately, Web 3 made people hustle with the chance of a reward. So it was like, okay, you just grind, you give first, and maybe you win. And then if you win it big. What we started doing was, hey, you know what? No, this is a guaranteed reward because guess what? PayPal did it. Guess what? Uber
Right.
was doing it, right? I mean, you were getting $5 for every friend you referred. If you can just find those ways of the referral base so that again your super users become the ones that go and talk about you. Like when I have an ambassador create a thread about how to use Breshna, that is so much more impactful than me going and saying, trust me, this is the best thing that's going to happen to you today. So I think it's literally that idea of reward your users for spreading the word. But I also think that if we talk about the Web3 world, so I mean, within Breshnaverse is literally going to be a 3D carnival. So, like what we're building right now is on Unreal Engine. We're building carnival stands where you will walk up to the carnival stand and there's like, I mean, you can have your Ferris wheel and your cotton candy machine and your DJ booth and your.
On my Oculus?
Nope.
Okay, just on
That's
desktop.
it's on desktop, and that's another. I think that's another. A misconception is if it's a metaverse, it has to be VR or AR. I mean, metaverses, video games have been. I mean, metaverses have been around forever. SimCity was a metaverse. Like, I mean, we've been in virtual worlds, and everyone defines it differently. But at least the way I define it is, you are on your desktop, you enter a 3D virtual carnival, and that is the Breshnaverse. But what's really interesting is Web3 gaming was talking about this play to earn, right? And
Play to earn.
unfortunately, the problem with play to earn was that the emphasis was on earn and not play, right? And when you bring people into an ecosystem only to earn, then they earn and your token value goes up. But then guess what they do with it? They're going to go and sell that token, right? Because they're only there to earn. So there is no, as an economist, I have obsessed over sustainable tokenomics. And one of the things that I've realized, the Axie Infinity, BBC was doing a documentary on Axie Infinity just the other day, of how, I mean, there were entire economies of countries that were running on this play to earn, but it went down so fast because no one was putting money back into the economy, right? It's an open economy of the game. And if you have a currency that keeps getting inflated because people want it, but then they keep going and dumping it, then it will come down. And I think that it cannot be a play to earn, it has to be a play and earn. So there's a lot of
Ooh.
earns, but it's like step and earn, make and earn, learn and earn. Because if there's
Yeah.
and then you're gonna have that underlying utility in that play, make, step, learn, whatever it is. And then people are gonna bring it back because they're gonna want to continue earning.
Yeah, you know what's beautiful in what you said? I'm not going to go into the technical side of things. I'm going to go into sort of bringing the spaghetti together, because every founder I have spoken to, and this is sort of literally the work I do, is like bringing, you went from the World Bank and international development and understanding economics to a service-based, understanding the gap and purposeful communication, to a service-based model to support gaming in a nonprofit way that became sustainable, found the bigger opportunity for scale, which now is Breshna.io. Now with the Web3, you're bringing back your economic background and focusing on sustainable tokenization. I mean, this is what the beauty of growth of human beings and entrepreneurs really is, right? Because now you start to take from every experience to make what you're focused on now even better. And it's just really important to understand. Like, I was interviewing somebody yesterday and she's like this PR genius. She's like one of the top in the world, but she had retail background. She used to throw events. I mean, you just kept going in this like really weird cycle. She was an inventor. And I was like, how the hell did you end up here? But it all made sense after the story was told. Right. And so, no, I would love for you, Mariam, if there's a founder in that spaghetti stage, what do you advise them to do right?
Oh, Seema, I think it's I mean, when you're at that spaghetti stage, it literally feels like you're pushing this boulder up a hill and you're the only one doing it and it has no momentum and you're just at it, and you're like, what am I even doing? This is so hard. You've given up your day job. You're probably like, taking a big financial cut. Your family's probably judging you. I mean, it's a lot, right? I mean, you're at that stage. And I have always approached this. It sounds really cliche, and a little bit like mushy, but I've always approached it with these three P's, which is passion, perseverance, and purpose. So if you have that passion in your belly and you have that purpose, that direction, and if you persevere and show up every single day, that's literally it. I mean, because when you're zoomed in, showing up every single day, you don't realize just the progress you're making. But once you zoom out, you see, I mean, it might be very zigzag because you're like setback, setback, setback. It's like one step forward, three back. But once you zoom out, you actually realize that it does move upwards. And I think that there is just this amazing beauty to that consistency that we were talking about. is there is no such thing as overnight success. Every overnight success was 10 years in the making. And I really, really do believe that just passion, perseverance, and purpose, I mean, you would be amazed at what that's. I mean, the result may not be what you think it is, but it is going to pay off big time in some shape or form.
Awesome. 3 quick questions. What's your unicorn vision? What's the vision for Breshna.io?
Empowering the next 100 million people to tell their stories through video games. So it's actually a decacorn vision.
Love it. What's your niche positioning? Like, who are you targeting? Well, you just said it actually in that. So that's really your positioning as well. And your intelligence package, your IP, right? What would you consider as the thing that makes you most unique?
The moat, I mean, for us is the team that's building it. We build fast, we're capital efficient, we have runway for the next 27 months. Bear market has got nothing on us. So we fail fast, we fail forward. Number 2, we understand the pain point from a very non-gamer, non-Web3, non-tech perspective. So it's a very, very unique perspective. And I think, number 3 is, I would have to say the community that we've built, because we were building the community before the product. There might be a bunch of other products out there, but the community that we've built is probably our biggest driver.
Awesome. And Mariam, I always ask the founders on here, how can this community support you in your growth?
Make a game. I would love for anyone who's listening to just go on Breshna.io. It's for everyone. You don't have to be a gamer. You don't have to be a coder. You could literally make a game. So Breshna.io, Breshna, completely free. It's lightning fast and it's no code. And I just love to see games being made on Breshna.
And kids, teachers too, right? Like, this is a big education push. Huge, right? Oh my
Huge.
God.
It
Okay,
takes-
love it. Love it. And where can people find you? Breshna.io or LinkedIn, or where do you want to direct people?
Yeah, so I build in public on Twitter. So if you want to get like the what is happening with the spaghetti right now, it's happening, and I continue to build in public on Twitter. So it's at Breshna Game, which is the Breshna handle, or at Gaming for Dev, which is my own. I'm on LinkedIn as well, so I'm very, very active on social media. They always say pick 2 channels and then just go with them. So mine are Twitter and LinkedIn. So I'd say those are the places to reach.
Amazing. Mariam, listen, thank you so much for being on this episode of From Spaghetti to Growth. Like, what an incredible story. What an incredible journey. I look forward to continuing and watching you guys grow. And that is an incredible vision to be part of. So thank you for being here. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Hello, S2G Tribe, aka Growth Tribe. As an entrepreneur, I know time is currency, and I don't take it lightly that you listened into today's episode of the From Spaghetti to Growth podcast. I hope it added value, and I'm truly honored to be part of your entrepreneurial journey. Be sure to head to disruptive.ceo and the soon-to-be-coming SeemaAlexander.com to grab today's show notes and free resources to uncover opportunities to turn your unique spaghetti into growth. If you found value in today's episode, please rate, comment, and subscribe on your podcast platform, and keep listening. Look forward to seeing you on our next episode.